Welcome. This Monday, we got the Prospect Podcast. I have Coach D with me to my left, and then I have our special guest today, linebacker coach of Norwich University, PJ Arcuri. We're excited to talk to him and dive into some different things quickly on Coach's background. Went to college at Plymouth State University, and then coached from 2020 to 2023 at Wagner. And then I believe he was at University of New England for a year as outside linebackers coach, and now is at Norwich University. So quickly moving himself up the ladder there. And we're excited to talk to him about linebacker play, the young guy on the rise in the coaching world. Coach, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, guys, for having me on. This is awesome. So anytime I have a chance to do this, it's pretty cool.
Cool. Very cool. Talk about your background in football, playing days, and then, what decided you to get into college coaching, and a little bit about, what you've done from your career standpoint.
Yeah. So originally from Staten Island, New York. So I'm always going to be proud of that. I love where I'm from. Great food, great pizza. Played high school football at all boys Catholic school in New York State, St. Peter's. So played against great competition. So it's the same league, that St. Anthony's is in, Stepanak, Chaminade. So we had some pretty good teams my last 2 years. So we kind of, turned it around going into my junior year when we were like 2-7 to losing in the semifinals to Mount St. Michael. And then my senior year, we took that big jump to the AAA, lost in the semifinals to Stepanak when they kind of their first year, they had it rolling. And then from there, I did a post-grad year at Bridgeton, Maine. So I kind of went from living outside of New York City to the middle of nowhere in Maine.
Where in Maine did you go? Where?
In Bridgeton Academy in Bridgeton, Maine. So again, it's an all boys 1 year post-grad school. So still connected to a bunch of guys there. I saw, we were all at New England Elite. So I saw one of my coaches, Matt Burgess, still talk to the current coach and some of the administrators. Any chance I get a chance to go and visit there, even to help out like the current players, because it's kind of tough out there in recruiting now these days. So any chance, not even to help out for Norwich, but just to help them out in general. And then after that, went to Plymouth as a student in Plymouth, New Hampshire. So kind of keeping it in like the small town, rural background in New England. And then about my junior year, kind of figuring out, what I wanted to do after college, and had no idea what I wanted to do. And, I come from an athletic family. My dad's side was a big college basketball, family in New York City. My cousin Katie is the athletic director at St. Peter's, that big school in Jersey that kind of went on a couple of runs. Then her brother, they both played at Ramapo. They're in their Basketball Hall of Fame. My aunt, my uncle have played college basketball, and my two younger cousins are going to be seniors in college. One of them plays at Cortland. He was an all D3.com basketball player. And my other cousin plays at Morrisville. So I definitely did not get the basketball height on my dad's side at all. Everyone, I'm like 5'9" in a good day. Everyone else is like 6'3", 6'4". And then on my mom's side, my uncle is Jerry Azanaro. So legendary, football coach in New York City and in New England. So my introduction when I was a kid to basically football was Syracuse football. So Paul Pasqualoni, George DeLeon, Dwight Freeney. My uncle was his position coach. Who at an early age, I was around, college football and at a high level. Because I remember when I was a kid, like that, those were probably like the heydays of Syracuse football. So kind of following my uncle around when, he was at some other schools. And then the big break was at Oregon. And that was awesome with Chip, going to the Rose Bowl games, the national championship, and the Fiesta Bowl. Then they went to the Eagles and stuff. So it was always kind of something I think at a young age I've always wanted to do. And then the good thing is I kind of got started early. My senior year, I did an internship at a prep school in New Hampshire for athletic administration, and they allowed me to be a volunteer football coach. And the head football coach was actually someone who played for my uncle at UMass, Matt Dawson. So then I worked with him. It was awesome for that 1 year to kind of get an intro to football, basically at the high school, prep school level. And then there was an opportunity with my uncle's connections and Matt Dawson working for Tom Masella, because Coach Masella and my uncle went to high school with each other in Staten Island. I ended up being a GA for him for 2 years and kind of stayed on a little bit kind of in that restricted role my last year. And basically just from a knowledge of learning the game from all the coaches I worked with, I basically, got to work with, Coach Masella in every position group that I had. So, everything I know about defensive football basically all comes back to my uncle and Coach Masella and all the other coaches, that I worked for. And then after the 22 season, was thinking about, if I really wanted to stay or not. Just, we had some coaching changes. They've really turned it around. We didn't really win. I think we won 1 game in 2 years. Had an opportunity through my connections with, we were talking about Bobby Johnson before, to go to UNE, went up to interview, really fell in love with the place. I've always visited Southern Maine since I was a kid, and the school is on the beach. They have a blue turf. They were on the rise, new program, and really worked with some good coaches there. Mike Lichten hired me. I think, he's a great football coach. He's had a great, influence on my career. Our defensive coordinator at the time, he left this past year, Kenny Trishita, Connecticut guy, Italian guy. So we kind of really hit it off right away, just coaching philosophies and just kind of grinding. He taught me a lot, just, really about recruiting and kind of being a position coach. I never ran my own room before. That was kind of always something everyone said to me, like, you have a pretty good resume, but you don't have that. You ran your own room. So he kind of, helped me out a lot. And even on the offensive side of the ball, our OC there, Tim Viles, unbelievable, worked with Eric Roos, who was the O-line coach, now is the OC at Rochester. And, on the other, on defense, Alex Morganti, who played there, is doing a good job being the D-line coach. So I stayed there for a year. We had our first winning season, went 6-4, beat some big teams. We opened up, beat Coast Guard, we beat Plymouth State at Plymouth State. We lost homecoming by 2 to Rochester. That was a crazy one. And then we put some big numbers up against Nichols and kind of, lost the last 3 games and put a sour taste in our mouth. But, going 6-4 in college football is pretty hard in these days. And then didn't really expect to leave after, I think I was there for 9 months. But then, Bobby kind of gave me a call saying, Norwich is going to have an opening. It's going to be full-time, with possibilities of also, getting more, jobs there, or more titles and more pay. Right. So I kind of got there as the outside linebacker coach. I had met our head coach, Bill Russell, at a camp at Jersey Juice, kind of down in South Jersey, because he's the main guy to kind of introduce myself to him. And when I came up basically for the interview, he was like, hey, it's yours if you want it. I was like, hell yeah. I think even when I talked to him before, the first 5 minutes on the phone, I was like, we have very similar philosophies in recruiting and football, and especially in defensive and linebacker play. So came on January of 24, and then June I got the recruiting coordinator title. And then almost, I think a week ago, now I'm coaching, the inside backers and still being the recruiting coordinator. So kind of, nice. In a good way, kind of rising up and making sure, I think at every place I've been, I've never left a place with any animosity. I still talk to people at every school I've worked at. And I've always kind of told people, I learned this really from a young age, even not being in athletics, no matter what job you have, just do good where you're at. And if you want to leave, someone will find you. But I kind of just don't like where, and especially in coaching in general, people always kind of have one foot out the door because they've coached this many years in college. They should be at this place, or they should have this title. So that's probably my biggest, advice to young coaches is to do good where you're at, and, jobs will find you and stuff like that. But yeah, that's kind of really it of my background. So New York City guy, and now I'm living in, a nice small town of Vermont. So it's 2 totally different places.
Yeah, that's for sure.
What made you want to get into coaching? What was it about coaching? You said from the time you're young, you intern with somebody. What was it about coaching that you knew that you wanted to get into it?
Yeah, I think always at a young age. And I just kind of saw a quote about being obsessed with things in a good way. I think I was always obsessed with athletics. I think it kind of always goes back to my uncle. I've kind of seen through his career kind of the ups and downs, the peaks and valleys of being a college football coach. And of course, when you're winning, Pac-12 championships or winning the Rose Bowl, everything's, great and there's no issues. But then when you go, I know one year when I was a kid, he was at Duke for 3 years. And the cool thing is Bill O'Brien was the offensive coordinator, and I think they won like 3 games in like 3 years, and then he got let go. So I've kind of seen every aspect of college coaching or just football in general. And even like that was like, oh shoot, like this is like, as much of a sport it is, it's more of a business sometimes. And I was just like, this is awesome. And I think, every probably mentor in my life has always been a football coach. So my high school coach, Mark DeCristoforo, I go back to Matt Burgess at Bridgeton Academy. I go back to, starting with Matt Dawson and then going with Tom Masella and then Mike Lichten, and now Bill Russell. I think every head coach I've worked for has almost become a mentor to me. So I think in just the aspect of, and now just like coaching in general, I think it's just helping kids now. I think a lot of college football sometimes, people don't want to help kids. And at the end of the day, like I think football is a children's game, right? Some guys have started playing football since they were like in the 5th grade or the 6th grade. So I think for me, it's just, following my uncle's career and kind of seeing like the highs and lows and just saying to myself, I think I can do this. I don't know if I can do this, not that I care, but who knows, like I may never coach in the NFL and I'm okay with that. But like being where I'm at now, it's just been, really, really cool. I think just having fun doing what I do, right? I think coaching football beats doing some other things that no one wants to do.
Oh, yeah.
And and I know like some people who have like left their corporate job in their early 20s and then their coworkers who's been there for 15 years, like, dude, like I wish I did that when I was your age. So I think, of course, sometimes you don't make the money at some of the levels that the 1A coaches make, but your lifestyle, is so much better. I think sometimes with just comparing it to other jobs, I think it's really fun for me to, at the end of the day, to help kids out. I think that's the number one thing.
No doubt about it. I think the opportunity to obviously work with kids, it's going to keep you young, and it keeps you involved with the sport, and it's still a sport. It's fun. So even though there's a grind to it, in the end, you're coaching football. So that's a great part about it. What is it? So talk about position wise, because you work with a couple different positions. Now you kind of focus more in the linebacker area. Did you play linebacker in high school?
Yeah, I played inside backer, so I kind of get back to what I was.
So talk about that. Talk about position stuff and the attraction to it, and kind of some of your philosophies from a linebacker standpoint.
Yeah, I think just overall, like kind of recruiting the position. I think at our level, you really don't have to be obsessed with like height and weight. I think, maybe when I was at Wagner, you can kind of be, we want our guys to be, 6 foot or taller or weigh this weight. I think even at the D3 level, it's just like, I don't care. You may have linebackers who are 6 feet that can run, or you may have guys that are 5'9" that can do the same exact thing. So I think from like a height aspect and a weight aspect, I never really like look down at kids. I think at the end of the day, like I'll never turn down a good football player. So I think that's one of the things with recruiting the position. I kind of, check off. The second thing is, when I recruit any position, I always like to make sure, like I ask them, like, try and find out how much they really love football. I don't know if kids these days, especially post-COVID, really love football. So I kind of find that out of just like, what do you like about football? No matter what position you play, I ask them, what their favorite play is. So if you start talking with a linebacker, he might be talking about one of his favorite blitzes or one of his favorite coverages and get into the techniques of being a linebacker. I think I think that really shows how much, if a kid can say their favorite play and know the ins and out of it, then they're pretty smart and they probably love football, and kind of get into a more of like, no matter what level of football you play at Division 1A, 1AA, 2, 3, or NAI or whatever, college football kind of ends up being a job for these kids. I know at our school, we kind of have the unique aspect of we are also a military school. So like you're going to be balancing a lot of stuff, but I don't think kids really realize. I think they just think of like, oh, like, if you go to whatever, Rutgers or Boston College, that's more of a job. Yeah. And they have a lot of money at stake. But I think even like at our levels, it's still a job. You still have to balance, your academic life, your social life, and your athletic life. So I always like to check out, try and find out who they are personally, ask about their family, what are they into, their background and stuff. And then just for, the position philosophy, I think it just, it's cliche, but, if I watch a highlight tape and a kid loafs, like, I don't care who you are, like, I don't think I'll recruit you. I think that's kind of, I think maybe sometimes that's the old school in me of just being around, old school coaches in a good way of like, we want guys that run to the football. And I think, I've been around some pretty good linebackers at all the schools I've been at, at Wagner College. We had a kid from New York named John Joya. Arlington, New York kid, was a walk-on, earned his way to be a full scholarship captain his last year. And then he just transferred to Towson and was an honorable mention in an all-CA team. And then I go to UNE where, I coach a pretty good outside backer who was 5'8", and he was all conference. We had an inside backer who wasn't really that tall from Rhode Island, was an all conference player this last year, leader on the team. And then you go to Norwich where, we had a player named Shane Letty who was a captain. He's going to be in the Army. I think he's getting deployed soon. He was from Manasquan down in Jersey, and he won, the Defender of the Nation award, which goes to the top linebacker at a military institution and the first player in Division III. So if you kind of look at, a lot, even as a player, as a coach, sometimes the toughest guys, and they kind of has to be with the position at inside backer, the toughest guys on the team and the smartest guys on the team have to be at inside linebacker. So I think it really goes back to like how tough you are. And I'm not talking about like, tough if you're going to fight someone. It's the toughness to me. It's like, are you going to be the first one to a meeting at 9 a.m. or whatever? Are you going to be the first one on the field? Are you going to, if kids are kind of slacking off, are you going to check a kid, not like in a jerk way, just be like, hey, dude, like, lock in or whatever. So I think to me, it's like, I always like to find out, are the linebackers a captain? Are they vocal? Because to me, like when I played in high school, I had to talk on every play when I was a player. And I think, I think some of that stuff really goes, under the radar when you're talking about linebackers. Because to me, like I remember when I was a kid, like the linebackers I loved were like AJ Hawk, Brian Cushing, Clay Matthews played outside backer, or, James Laurinaitis at Ohio State. Those are some of like the toughest guys in the NFL and even in college. So I think sometimes not a lot of people like to talk about that, but when you think about like the old school linebackers, they're tough meatheads who are also like the smartest players on the team. So that's kind of like my philosophy with, being a linebacker and stuff.
And at Norwich, I'm sure it's a little different from a recruiting standpoint. But are you looking for specific attributes athletically, or are you just looking for a guy that can play?
Yeah, I think, you always want to like see sometimes, which is cool, like maybe on accident, they could be running a blitz that we run or running a coverage that we run. Sometimes, you could be an outside. I use this all the time as an example. Like you could be an outside backer and one play you're going up against, the number 2 receiver in the slot and man coverage. And then the next play, you're going up against an offensive tackle. So I think every linebacker, inside and outside, you're going to interact probably with every position on the football field. So I think it's just, like you said, can they run? Can they tackle in space? What are their reads coming out of high school? Right? Some people like to read the guard. Some people like to read the running back. And they may just be a kid that is their best player on the team that can just be like, oh, he was like the ball hawk, like hybrid safety kid that just went to the football. And that's okay, right? Just what your scheme is. But I think for me, it's just like, I don't like to, when I recruit, I don't really like to over evaluate the kid's scheme to be like, oh, we're a 4-down defense, but this kid's coming from a 3-4 scheme. I think at the end of the day, like, it's just football. I think if we just get the kids to coach them up, get them in the right position, they'll be very successful. So, yeah, I don't really like to over evaluate. Yes, I want to see kids do good and be very good in high school and take the best players that we can get. But I think scheme-wise, I like to see if it is a fit because we're more of a 4-down team if they're running 4 down. But if it's a kid coming from like the 3-4 world or the 3-3 stack world, that's okay because you don't know what their high school division, if it's lacking numbers and stuff like that. So,
yeah, absolutely. There's no doubt. I mean, especially the type of defense you play requires, certain guys have certain skill sets at linebacker. So, I mean, I think that's a big part of it, but also the level, right? So what you can, a guy who comes downhill and fills holes and is a banger inside, it may have much more success at Division III level than necessarily, where you got to run sideline to sideline, maybe at FBS. So obviously,
yeah,
that part's really important. I would almost guess that Division III, if the guy can play and really just make tackles as a tackling machine, that's a huge asset right off the get-go. I mean, obviously, if they're undersized, that you have to evaluate that. But but if they're reasonable size, if they're a tackling machine, that's an important thing.
Yep.
It's and there are guys that just have knacks for getting to the ball. I think it's interesting you talk about like what you have them read, because like when I play linebacker in college, like we had like a kind of a process of how we were taught to read the triangle there. So and we leveraged the guards first, and then from there we moved on. But there were guys that really just see ball, get ball, and have a lot of success with it. How do you and linebackers are different, like the more they just get a feel for it and kind of can see the flow of the picture happening on the run, the better they're going to be than a guy locked in, particularly on a read, right? So they got to be able to see the picture as they're reading. What do you try to teach them when they come in there? Because that's always, like I'm sure you get some of your best linebackers that come to you are guys that probably, my guess, there's some guys that weren't reading anything. Like they saw a ball, they went and got ball. And if they made a mistake, they were so aggressive and they were so, good at making plays that if they made a mistake once in a while and got caught, coaches probably in high school were willing to kind of like, hey, this guy makes so many plays, we'll deal with it, right? But when you're in college, there are certain things they have to go through. So what do you teach them when they first come in to try and start to get a whole picture of everything?
Yeah, I think it starts, like with the first install. So basically almost like a position manual, and kind of go through like our philosophies. I always kind of said, that yes, I'm the position coach, but this is our position group. So kind of get guys to be like, and it's even like, I've had some drawings that like are like people. So you can draw up stuff on like PowerPoint, or we use Visio or whatever, where it's almost like circles and stuff. But it's like I like to use film. So like even like some of the really good linebackers I've been around, of course, like, we all have some film access to like, the bigger Division I schools in the NFL. And if you see like a really good college football linebacker, his first step, it's very like you almost think that they just stop because they're so like slow and patient, and they just lock their eyes on their read. So like you see some guys who are so aggressive, they just go downhill right away, and they may be like over pursuing the football, and the ball cuts back like in their B gap or something. But I always kind of say like, guys, like you're moving with whatever your read is, right? So if that guy goes left, well, your first step has to be left, and then we go from there. So I think it's really just like, training them on the field, training their eyes of, you're going to do agility stuff, you're going to do footwork stuff. But at the end of the day, like I really believe in of just like, you're playing 11-on-11 football. So any chance I get to like in an individual period to be like, we're going to take whatever, we're going to put 2 guys up at inside backer, have 5 guys to simulate the 5 offensive linemen, and then we'll put a tight end on the ball. Then we'll put a tight end off the ball, because that could also affect, our reads as well. And getting those guys to see like, this is how we're going to go really slow, because sometimes, you guys may need to process fast but move slow, which is crazy to say because, when like guys say the bullets are flying, you're gonna get anxious and move fast. But at the end of the day, it's going to go back to your, August 14th, day 1 practice position read. So kind of really starting to where like, on the board of this is what we're reading, develop that or progress that from you're drawing it on the board to your install page, to hear some film of our guys doing it, and then take some film of guys doing it in college and the NFL. That's the one thing I really like doing sometimes with, with linebacker stuff. Or like, this is what we did last year. The guys who were captains, all conference players, awesome. Well, that's that same play, a similar defense to what they're doing at Alabama. Then that's that same play, similar defense that they're doing at the New England Patriots. So they see, oh, shoot. And also, like, I jokingly say, oh, yeah, guys, you guys don't believe what I always joke around my guys. Oh, you guys don't believe the drills I'm doing. Well, Mike Vrabel's doing that with the New England Patriots. So at least I'm doing something right sometimes. But I usually get a pop there with a laugh. But yeah, it's kind of like progressing it, right? Just go from the board to huddle to film, and then you take it all together. I really believe in, showing film of every drill that I do. Just so and you can find YouTube videos. There's enough subscription and YouTube and Twitter clips of where you can be like, hey guys, we're running this individual period. I'm going to show you guys that on the film. It takes out like a minute of explaining. And then I always say, if something goes wrong, it's my fault, not your fault, because I didn't explain it good enough. So that's the one thing I always believe in. I think, the one thing, and I know with this generation, I'm a part of it. You're not just going to tell them a play and they're going to run through a brick wall. They're going to ask you why. Well, why do I need to spill this guard and power? Well, if you spill this guard and power, you're going to have the backside inside backer over the top. You may have a safety coming down and stuff like that. So it's no more of the days of, fill your gap, make that tackle, and they're going to be like, okay, I'm going to run through a brick wall. They may run through a brick wall, but I think as coaches, you need to explain to them, if they don't do that and they go in the wrong gap, what is the difference that's going to happen? So sometimes it may be, if you go through the right gap, you're going to get a TFL or 1 yard gain. If you go in the wrong gap, it's going to be a 50-yard touchdown. So I think explaining to them just how they want the why, I think explaining to young inside backers and even older inside backers, right? Because this year we're going to be playing some experienced older guys to be like, why did our 2 senior inside backers make plays? Because they were very, very disciplined with their eyes. Their eye discipline was unbelievable, and how slow they were in their instincts and stuff like that. So
I think that's a really big part of it. I like the part about where you have them look at players playing in your defense from other schools. I think that's a huge, huge thing. My college coach was Vernon Hargraves. That was my linebacker coach in college. And we used to watch probably once a week, even in season, we would get the cut-ups from Ohio State at the time. They had a really good linebacking core.
Mhm.
I want to say maybe it was Katz and Moyer and them, but they may have even before them. But they ran the same defense. We were 4-3, and we would get the clips. He was friends with whoever the defensive coordinator was there at the time, and we would get the clips, and he would show us, because those guys, like, when he was explaining things and how we read it and what you talk about, like, the biggest tendency a linebacker is to rush the read, and because you're worried about a blocker coming down on you or getting caught in the wash or all these different things. And when sometimes you rush the read, it's way worse to end up going in one direction fast and having to change direction than it is to be a little bit slow and then going into the right direction. Ultimately, it's actually quicker. That's the hardest thing to get linebackers to understand, that if you make a mistake and have to go in a different direction, you're basically out of the play,
Yeah.
So you're better being a little bit slower to the party and getting there and being involved in the play and getting to where your responsibility is than making an assumption, being fast, and then having to go in the other direction. And then it's just, you're 99 out of 100 times you're not going to get there. So, and then if you do make a mistake, you're almost better off trying to find a window and getting through that window versus trying to get back across, because you might be able to sometimes guys chase things down from the backside. So, those are the hardest things to get guys to understand, and I think that's a big part of linebacker play. So I really love that you're talking about that. You're going to say something. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. You answered it, so you said it right.
Yeah. No, it's an interesting thing about linebacker play, and it's like one of those bad play but good play. So like, you went in the wrong direction when you made the play. Like, if you're gonna do anything, do it fast, right? If you're gonna make a mistake, better just go all the way on that mistake and just try to make it happen. What as far as like kind of what is the landscape of how you guys operate philosophically? So do you from a defensive standpoint, are you guys like try to get people to spill to the sidelines? Do you try to spill everything into middle linebacker? How do you guys operate from that standpoint?
Yeah, we kind of do everything. So we're, our defensive coordinator, Pat Madden, is unbelievable. So New England guy, went to Wesleyan, G'd at BC, at what was at one point the defensive coordinator, I believe, like over 5 years ago at Elon before Signetti. So he has, really, really smart guy. We kind of, in a good way, give offenses a different picture. So they may think if we call this play, we're in their front, we're always going to spill it. Well, in this play, we may box it. So I think, in a good way, like, the D line and kind of our stand up outside backer, depending what the play call is and, how we're fitting it with the force player, they may spill it out to the inside backer or the other outside backer if you're a DN. And then one play, they may be boxing it back to the inside backer. So I think it all depends, in a good way, what I'm sure everyone does, right? It all depends, what your coverage is, what your support player, and what you kind of call for, a 5-man pressure, or if you're bringing 4, if it's an inside backer or an outside backer. I think it depends in a good way. And I think it changes up pictures for the offense, right? Everyone, sees what offensive coaches are doing now where, some teams are still running that high tempo Chip Kelly offense. And now you have some teams that are going back to, some teams in our conference are going back to, 12 personnel. Well, to me, 12 personnel is 21 personnel, but they're also giving you 12 personnel in every different picture. So you may get 12 personnel with 2 tight ends, and it may be, 4 wides. So I think it's really a lot, game planning and, what kind of picture you're going to give to the offense. It almost becomes like a chess match, right? That's what I think, when on game day or at offense versus defense, at the end of the day, right, the goal is it's never going to happen, but to call that perfect play, and maybe 2 out of 5 plays, you may get a play where like, oh, like this is what we saw on film. This is the perfect play to call against it. Then we just have to execute, and so do the offense. But no, we do everything. We, like I said, we box it back to inside backers. We spill it to, to safeties, sometimes corners, and we do some other cool things where, it's kind of what Don Brown does, like with the denting and everything, when you kind of take it on nose to nose and you dare the guy to run it inside. So you're almost kind of, yeah, correct. You're taking it on, like, you don't like to say you're taking it on with your face, but you're taking it on,
But you're taking it on right there.
You're
down the midpoint, right? Like you're that point. You're going right through him, basically.
Yep. Yeah, and it's awesome. The kids really bought into, and the kids know, right, when they hear this call and then the inside backer makes the call, they know, they're spilling it, or they have the quarterback in the read game. So we, in a good way, we over communicate, but it's like one word. I really believe in, communication is key. And I kind of got this a lot from my uncle where, like, you can communicate, but if I say whatever, if I say, Buffalo, well, Buffalo can mean 500 different things, but for that one kid, that can mean that one thing. So I really believe in, stuff like that. So.
Interesting. Very, very interesting stuff. As far as like what you guys, you had mentioned when you're at Wagner, you had a kid that transferred up, and is that what is the transfer portal? Does it impact your recruiting? Does it impact transfers where you guys are? Because I know you guys are a military school, so it's probably different. But I'm curious if any of that is impacting you guys at all.
Yeah. So another good thing is you don't have to do the military to attend Norwich. So
okay.
we have 4-year regular students. They're called civilian students. In recruiting, I literally say it's the same thing of going to a 4-year school, except when you go to class and you walk around campus, you see men and women in their uniform of the day or camouflage. The only thing that's separate are the dorms. And the kids like it, in a good way. So there's a lot of, our side, the school's been around since 1819. So there's a lot of rich tradition. And then for recruiting, we took a kid who was a quarterback at Merrimack, didn't really play a lot. And then he transfers to us for his 5th year. And then he has another year this year with COVID and everything. And he was our leading receiver with like 450 yards. First year ever playing receiver. So, and then we do take transfers. I think sometimes it has to be the right fit, right? I think sometimes, to tell a kid, we're in Northfield, Vermont. Kids kind of like, oh, you're in the middle of nowhere, blah, blah, blah. But I always say, we're the best kept secret in the Northeast or maybe the country, because when you get on campus, you feel what makes Norwich so special. And in a good way with recruiting and transfers, we also offer majors that some other schools don't have, and we offer majors at a high level. So we have the second-ranked cybersecurity department in the country. We have an unbelievable criminal justice program. We offer engineering. So in a good way, we recruit nationally. So if you look at this recruiting class, we have 17 states, and including America, we took guys from 3 countries. So we took a receiver from Canada through our connections with an alum who played at Norwich, and then we took a kid that played high school football in Southern California who's originally from Greece. So we literally, I always tell recruits, transfer, freshmen, you're going to be in a locker room with the kid who's going to be in the military, and he could be from Michigan. Well, to the right of him is a civilian kid who's on defense from New York City. And then to the left of that kid is going to be, or to the left of that kid's going to be a kid from Arizona. So in a good way with the internships and alumni connections, we're all over the country in a good way. Like we say, Norwich is a national brand. So it actually does help out a lot when we go get transfers, because some of them probably know our alum. And the good thing is now that some of us, Coach Russell, Coach Madden, Coach Johnson have been doing this, for 10 plus years. I think I'm going on year 6 or year 7. In a good way, you end up recruiting kids who maybe took a partial or a walk-on at a scholarship school that were I'm probably a D3 player, and you kind of re-recruit them. So I think just like with the transfer portal, it's all about connections, right? I know at probably every school that I've been at, when we were in the hunt with a transfer kid, one of us probably recruited him as a senior in high school. So I think that's right. We do take transfers. I don't say we're going to be a heavy transfer team just because of what we have to offer and stuff like that. But we did get a transfer a weeks ago and stuff like that, which was again a connection through an alum. And then the receiver Henry Bork was a connection, I believe, with Bobby, our OC. So I think just with everything, recruiting to me is all about connections and relationships. I don't think, and I think about this at every school I've been at, I don't think we'll just take a kid who's a transfer that we don't know about. And if we do, then he better be a really good player, because you're gonna do your homework, right? You're gonna find out, if he's been to multiple high schools, why has that happened? If he's been to multiple colleges. I remember one time I recruited a kid at a JUCO when I was at Wagner, and I found out he went to 3 different colleges, including that JUCO. And I was like, well, this is kind of a red flag. But then you actually talk to the kid of why that happened, COVID, if he was in high school, he lived in different areas, or geographically you have to go to this high school and stuff like that. But no, we'll take transfers. I think, maybe at most a year we'll take 3 or 4. I don't think we'll be a heavy, transfer team, like I said before, but.
Well, what is, so in order to rebuild the program and really start to get it to take the next step, what are some of the things that you guys are really starting to do there, since Coach Russell's taken over, to really rebuild the program and get it back in the direction that you want it to be?
Yeah, I mean, there's no hiding it, right? We didn't win a game last year. I think about it a lot every day, because I think after you go through a bad season, I think you rethink everything you know about football. I think that just being that's just being hard on yourself at the end of the day. But I think with us, especially after this past season, right, we ended the game playing Salve Regina, very, very good program in New England, probably the last decade. We go for 2 with a minute left to win the game. We score a touchdown. Our senior captain, I think it was a 50-yard run in power. The kids are juiced up. They're screaming at Coach Russell, go for 2. We don't get it. But at the end of the day, we were going to go out on our sword, right? We were going to go for 2 and get the upset. That probably following week or whatever, kids were in the weight room. And then they go through finals. They go home. we have an unbelievable strength coach. He was named college strength coach of the year, Scott Caulfield, unbelievable guy, from Vermont, local guy. He did a lot of stuff with Norwich when he was a kid, and the kids love him because he is probably the best strength coach I've ever been around. So you basically, in his world, he's the leader of the weight room, and it's probably the best weight room culture I've ever been around, just from the kids taking it seriously. The kids are getting on each other. They're playing music, very loud in a good way. Like each kid gets to pick what music for this day. Like, Friday, everyone wears all black and it's all like club EDM music, and the kids are losing their minds. When kids are maxing out, no matter if it's a kid that, is going to squat over 400 pounds or it's a smaller freshman who's going to squat, 255 or whatever, or 300 pounds for the first time, every kid is getting behind him. So I think that's also like, it speaks for the culture of, the senior leaders are taking charge of like, this is my last year and I have not won a lot of games. I don't want to be that class that it's like, oh, we turned it around, but we didn't win some games. So I think at the end of the day, the players are taking the program seriously. From a coaching standpoint, it starts with recruiting. And, we hit, the minute Salve ended, we're talking about recruiting. Some of us went out, that week of Thanksgiving. We came back the first weekend from December for a quick, overnight visit. We went back out before Christmas, and then just getting kids on campus and getting the right kids. I think you can tell by any school you work at or coach at, when you get a commit or when a kid's on campus, you can tell, all right, this is going to be a good feel. And it's really cool that we get feedback from the players because, the players are hosting kids. So I always say, ask us questions on recruiting visits, right, about the culture, about the football team, but the culture is the players. So I always tell parents and players, the best recruiters on this campus are our players. They set the tone. They establish the culture. So our kids did an unbelievable job at hosting this year. They took it seriously. And some of them said, good for those kids to say, hey, coach, like, this kid's great. We want him in our program, but like, we don't know how we feel about this kid. All right. It's your team, right? If you don't like the kid or you think the kid wouldn't fit well, it's your program. And I think for us with coaches, like study hall, we started, once a week, twice a week, every day, position meetings with your players about academics. And then we had a 3.1 GPA in the spring. So those are also the kids, like, so I have a senior outside backer who is going to be, Army ROTC. He'll probably get upset because I think his GPA is at least a 3.7. He probably has like a 4.0. He'll get upset about this. But then when we started the spring semester or the winter semester, he said to me, coach, like, what kids are struggling academically? Because I can say to him, like, hey, dude, come and meet with me like once a week. You have a 3.7 GPA. These are the kids, because I trust them when we're close. These are some of the kids that are like, we need to keep an eye out. And he'll go to them. And the cool thing is, in study hall, some of the captains went to study hall to help our guys. So if they were an engineering major, hey, dude, I took that class 2 years ago. The teacher's unbelievable. Don't be a jerk and mess this up for football players, because she loves football players.
Right.
So I think that speaks for itself, where like you can be a senior at a college after you just ended practice and meetings. You probably want to go back to your room and watch Monday Night Football or play, PlayStation. But you got captains who are going to study hall just to make sure study hall is being run right, so they're not acting like jerks and not talking. And then some of the kids are in the majors like, hey, dude, I'll help you out with this class. So I think stuff like that, speaks for itself. I think, at the end of the day, I think when you build a culture, you have to know who the players are. I always say, like, before I know what number he is, I want to get to know where he's from. And in our case, there's not a lot of guys who are from one area in New England. In my group, it was a mixture of core and civilian, kids from Connecticut, Massachusetts, New York, Texas, Pennsylvania, and stuff like that. So for me, it's like, you got to know who these kids are before like, I always say, right, you have to honor the relationship before you honor the task or the code. So before I can get on a kid or coach him up about something, well, I better know like who he is as a person. And I think that starts with, fall camp. I think fall camp is the best. I know it's a grind and some kids may hate it, but like that's where you build a team and that's where you start building the whole family aspect of football and stuff. So
no doubt about it. I mean, I think the off season is the key. Their investment in that, I think, is a huge component, and that's that's part of the culture. So sometimes the games get in the way of where you got to get to develop the team. Right, you got to get to the part that can really develop them and start to get them to that point, and then the things start to turn in the direction that you want to go. And obviously, the great thing about recruiting is you can go get some of those guys too. So.
Yep.
That's the beauty of it, Okay, we're good here, but we need this, and this, and let's go get those guys. Let's focus on that, and that's the beauty of recruiting. Does the I'm curious as far as like financial aid and those kind of things. So, because you have a lot of kids that do choose the military side. Yep. What do you guys do from that standpoint to help players? Because it is a private school, right? So in order to be able to, if they need financial aid.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I always tell kids that are like, if you look up any tuition of the school, kids lose their minds because they see like some schools are over $55,000, and I always say like, guys, like, if you're telling me in August you can't afford the school or July, like, relax a little bit. Like, you haven't applied, you haven't done your financial aid paperwork, your EFC and stuff. But we basically do a mixture of, and this is for all of our students, it's going to be, academic or merit award, and then they go through the FAFSA. So we do end up doing a good job, without like saying, guys, personal stuff with dollar amounts. But like our admissions program does a great job in financial aid of helping kids out because, we, in a good way, have to compete with state schools in New York and New Jersey, but then we also have to compete with state schools in Michigan, Texas, Pennsylvania. So sometimes the kids, we can either be the same as them or probably be a couple thousand more, but then also the kids realize, hey, if I go to Norwich and do cybersecurity, that's the second ranked in the country.
Right.
So it's like what a lot of those majors where it's like, all right, I have this state school and I'm from Ohio or PA or Jersey. Well, I want to do engineering. Well, Norwich may be a little bit more expensive, but I know if I go to Norwich and get an engineering degree, I can now do my internship in any state in the country. I always say that, and then we do offer, some ROTC scholarships. They're just in a good way, they're very, very competitive to get, and kids probably, if you're going for a 4-year, kids have to start the process probably ASAP. But I always tell a kid, like, if you're, and I get it, you want the cheapest package in the world, but I always think about it like, if you're just doing ROTC for the scholarship, do you really want to do ROTC? Like, there's so much stuff where the military helps you, during your college career or even post-college, where they help you with your, tuition and stuff like that. So that's probably the one thing I probably do the most with being a recruiting coordinator is, and especially with the younger coaches, or we've had some turnaround the last few months of like, when we recruit a kid who wants, because we offer every branch of the military, Army, Navy, Air Force, and the Marines, ask a kid why he wants to do the military.
Right.
I asked the kid, why do you want to do the military? Oh, my dad served, and my mom served, my grandfather served in World War II. My dad currently serves. I just met with a family where, his mom and dad both serve. I think his dad just, retired. So you get that aspect. Then you also get some aspects of, kids want to do it because they've always wanted to do it. And then there's also just a mixture of, the civilian aspect. I think right now we're as close to 50-50 as a football team as you can get of, ROTC and, the civilian aspect. And there's no like conflicts of like issues with those kids on our team. There may be a kid who, not in a bad way, it just wants nothing to do with the military, wants to go to school for 4 years, respects the hell out of the military. But then his best friend is getting ready to have a career in the Navy. which is unbelievable, I think. And then again, like that one kid could be from New York and his buddy could be from Florida. So I also think in such a cool way, like we end up dealing with kids from all different backgrounds. And it's really, really cool to deal with kids like that.
And I think that's something, Coach, that separates your program from others and is an appeal for some guys, right? Like they really don't understand that aspect of, hey, when you go away to school, a lot of it is geographical, right? Like there's going to be, some guys set a pinpoint of, and 3 hours in any direction, right? Whereas because of what Norwich offers and because of the reputation it has, that 3 hour window now expands to across the country. And you're just dealing with different aspects that within a locker room or just on campus in general are different than other schools. Coach, what is your total? What will you guys go into camp with total number wise on the roster? Like, how does that break down for you guys? Is there a limitation set, or is it just like, what are you bringing in?
Yeah. So like, I don't know what the exact number of like legit lockers we have. It may be like around, I think, 126. It's either between 125, 126, or 127. That's the highest amount we will bring in.
Got it.
So the one thing, right, some people bring in over 130, but they only have 110 lockers. So that means people may be doubling up lockers. We're never going to do that. We have nice, big, wide lockers that can fit a 6'3", 290-pound offensive lineman, and it can fit a 5'10", 185-pound DB or whatever. So those kids have enough space. I think right now, we're close to like 118, 119.
Right.
So, so it's a good number. It also goes back to like what you can handle. I think, sometimes when you bring in, over 130 kids, well, I always say the more kids you recruit, sometimes it's the more problems you have.
Yeah, no, listen, it's logistical too as well, right? Like you also want those kids that come there to feel comfortable in a you know what I mean? Like that could literally be a game breaker for a kid. Like, wait, I have to share a locker, I'm gone, right? Or that, and you talk about communication a lot, which I love, and just this world that we're living in right now, I think that whole communication aspect of it, in terms of whether it be recruiting or whether it just be communicating from, coach to player, player to coach. I think that two-way street that you guys have, and from what, in speaking with you and talking to Coach Johnson and all that kind of thing, I think the communication is clear cut, that both sides of it really know exactly what you're going to get when you get to where it is. Hey, this is what Norwich is about. This is how we do things. And I just think it's open. And I think that's a great way to do it. I think that's a respectful way to do it. But we really see a lot of programs that aren't doing it like that, right? And they'll, it's all the bells and the whistles until you get on campus. And now it's a whole different ball game, which I think is just, it's just another way to do it. It's not the way I would do it. It's not the way I think it should be done. But obviously it's the way Norwich does it. How do you guys do that with visits and that when it comes to that kind of communication? What's the process? Take us through that, kind of, hey, we start recruiting a kid and this is kind of how we go.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you look at this year, right, the full calendar of recruiting the class of 25. So you go like, and it's even crazier that like, I joke around about it too. Like if you would have said like when I was in high school, because I'm 28. So 10 years ago, I was 18. So a freshman in college. If you would have said to each other, you have to offer Division III football players in the month of May, I think I would have said you guys are crazy. So recruiting is completely changing. I remember coaches telling me, like when I went on the road at UNE, like, 10 years ago, high school coach was like, yeah, Division III spring recruiting didn't exist.
Didn't happen. Nope.
Yeah. So if you take a kid that I got from, a high school in North Jersey, he's going to do the military. So you recruit him, after spring ball. So then I'm going to go on the road for spring recruiting. So spring recruiting is done. Then with all these show days of like, which are awesome, right? New England did it. The Catholic schools in North Jersey did it. So now you can hit, the Paul Bergen, St. Joe's, Paramus in like 5 hours or a full day after I went on the road to see them. So you're almost even double.
Right. And you're referring to the mega camps, right, Coach? Like where you can go one-stop shopping, like, and all of these guys are putting on these like opportunities for lower level coaches to get there and see everybody in one spot rather than have to go to, 12 schools in a day.
Correct.
And hit on that. I can go to one spot and, hey, look at all these guys are here. And even if not, like, hey, I can find guys. Maybe I didn't have any clue that they were on the radar, right? So So you guys really push the mega camp stuff, is not mega camp, but camps in general, right? Like where more than one school is at. I got you.
Yeah. No, but the one thing that I was talking about and it's kind of spearheaded by the head coach at Avon Old Farm, Coach Hooley. So a lot of schools in New England and Jersey did it where, like, so you can be at 6 a.m. at DePaul Catholic, then 7:15 you're at St. Joe's Regional, then 8:15 you're at whatever, Bergen Catholic. Then you can end your day with Paramus Catholic. So it's basically like a show day. And
it's all coordinated.
And then the ones in Connecticut were unbelievable because you had coaches from like Boston College to Norwich University was there. And you're going to talk to almost every player there. So you go on the road spring recruiting, you start going to the camp circuit. So you're guaranteed to see that one player you want at 3 camps. And then you go to so we do a big summer visit in July. So he's probably going to come to that. And then you go, well, he's probably going to do a game day visit. We have an unbelievable game day atmosphere. It's probably like going to a Division I school with the mixture of Army and Navy. We have a flyover once a year for homecoming.
Wow.
We have the march down. We have a tailgate lot. We walk out our athletic facility with every flag for the branches of the military, including the American flag. We walk out the bagpipes. We run through the Corps of Cadets in the tunnel. They're doing push-ups when we score a touchdown. So to get a kid up there, you need to do that.
Right.
And then after that, you have to now go back on the road after the season for winter recruiting. So you're going to go to the same school with the same kids that you've been recruiting for almost 6 months. And then they do their overnight visit. So we do overnight visits. We do one early the first weekend of December, and then we get back in January. We'll do them until we build the class. So it's basically become almost like at our level, like 24/7, which is really cool because, everything that's happening in the Division 1A, 1AA level minus NIL is now going down to Division 3, right? Kids are doing summer visits. Kids want to take pictures in the jerseys and do a photo shoot. I think that's some things that are underrated at some schools where, like, to me, like, photo shoots matter. I hate to say it, that's, some people are going to think I'm crazy for saying that. But if a kid sees that you care about getting the full uniform out and building a locker for him and getting all we use a saber because, our mascot is the cadets. So they basically have a sword. We use, lights and everything. We have our own little turf. The backdrop, when they renovated parts of our athletic facility, put a backdrop or kind of on the wall of a football thing. So now we don't have to spend money on an actual photo shoot backdrop because our wall has a crazy, sick design. So to me, it's photo shoots matter because that also shows how much you care. To me this past year, a kid wore multiple jerseys throughout his high school career. He said to me, I said, hey, what jersey do you want to wear in the photo shoot? He goes, doesn't matter. I gave him every jersey he wore in high school.
Right.
But you have to, I think.
I think that's what separates it too. On those little things that look for us, are there some old school coaches that look at that oh, that's nonsense. It's whatever. It's this or that. Okay, that's great. But that might be the difference between a kid getting to campus, coming to campus. They want that bells and whistles show because they want to be able to post it on their social media. Mm-hmm. They want that, everybody likes to feel wanted, and that just adds a different level of wanted when they walk in that locker room and there's a number 2 jersey hanging in a locker for them. Mm-hmm. Hey man, this is what it could be if you come here. You know what I'm saying? That's the type of little, the little things I think that it's kind of, to some it's funny and it's this and it's a joke or whatever, but That's what separates it. That's what these guys want now. And look, there's nothing wrong with laying out a bunch of jerseys and making a kid feel wanted if that's what's going to take it to get it over his edge and all those kind of things. And then, then you can ask those, well, why do you love football? Or what do you really, you know what I mean? Like, that's when you can get into the nitty gritty of it. But it's all part of it. It definitely is, Coach. And obviously you being the recruiting guy, like, you see all that, right? The guys that were going to come to Wagner wanted it, and the guys that want to go to Norwich want it. It's the same kind of thing across the board.
Well, everybody wants to feel special.
Of course.
That's a big part of it. And, it just changed as to what you do to make them feel special. Before social media era, I'm older, so like they used to entice you with pretty girls on campus. You know what I mean? Like, you wouldn't do that the same way now because you'd have more. Not that there aren't pretty girls on campus, but because you'd have backlash for making that a focus, right? But to me, it's just trading one thing for another, right? So what helps the player feel comfortable and want to be a part of your program is important. In you kind of live in the time of what it is, right? And that's they like to post it to social media. They like to feel like, hey man, I'm going. I went to this place. This place was treated me like I was, I'm the guy, and there's no person that doesn't want to feel like, the place that they're going to doesn't appreciate them. So I think that to me, it's just like living in the times as to what the players feel like shows them appreciation, right? Because the one thing about recruiting versus when you come on, it's important to understand that my favorite movie for this, and Derek, you'll appreciate it. The program. Remember when he came on campus and it was the greatest thing, and then he actually obviously signs and goes there, and then he shows up the first day, and there's like.
There's no cheerleaders. There's no boss. There's no like, Wada, you're the guy. Like, it's all. Where am I? Like, you know what I mean? Like, and you're kind of the bar. But I think like that's part also, like, with the communication aspect. Like, hey, understand something. Yeah, I want you to come here and be a part of this program, but there's a process that goes along with it, and I think. Either way, once they get on campus, there's going to be that like, oh, wow, this is real moment. But when you have that open communication on both sides, it's less of that, oh, wow, this is a real moment type of situation. And I also love like what you talked about, like when you know your culture is changing and the team is changing, when those older guys start to take care of and babysit in a way those younger guys, like you said, staying later in study hall or having talking to those guys like, hey, you got to step it up in this part because look, if you're not on the field, it doesn't help us, right? So that type of, it's good teams are led by coaches, great teams are led by players, right? Like when you're starting to police that within your room, and it all kind of goes back to your old thing, like even 127 lockers, like that's what we're working with. We're not going to overload it or taking the transfers that, hey, it might only be 3 or 4, but they're the right pieces to the puzzle, the right ones that are coming into this locker room that understand what we offer, right? Those are that things, especially at the Division III level, I think that's separated because you're not getting all of the other bells and whistles or the NIL or the money and that type of stuff within it, and then get on campus so you can actually see what we do, feel what it is. And look, now okay, I might be able to go to that bigger school, but I really like what Norwich does here, right? Like, so maybe I choose this school looking forward. I think those are some of the things that guys at the high school level going to that next level really should take advantage of that you offer, right? And I think a lot of programs, I think the guys that do that kind of see a track upwards, and the guys that don't, maybe not so much, and look, and you've been at those higher levels, you see how they do it and how you guys do it. Like, it's different. It's always going to be different. It's just a matter of, where are our focal points? How are we going to communicate it? And then, who are we going to get on campus that really kind of like signs it and gets to where we're at?
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, the transfer portal is a little crazy at all levels, I think. Some kids, it's the same thing, right? I mean, when you get to campus as a true freshman, no matter what school you go to, you go from being, the prom king to no one, and then kids want to transfer. But that's like part of the process, right? I think every freshman at every school, no matter if you play football or play a different sport, you experience something of like, I do not want to be here.
Right.
And now when you're at like, I don't know, I think it's different with the D3 level where it's like, if you enter the transfer portal, all right, I get it if you want to go closer to home, because if you're far away or you just want to go closer to home, depending what state you're in. But if you're like, hey, I want to go up to the next level, well, it's like, dude, like, no offense, but like sometimes like the schools at the 1A and 1AA level aren't looking down, unless it's like the kid from Ferris State, right? He's going to Ole Miss. He's a dude. Like
you have to stand out in a certain type of way if you're going up, right? Like you need to have been the best player in the conference, or just something, right? Like for some reason you maybe fell through the cracks, or there was an issue, whatever. You went to that lower level school. Now you've killed it. You've proven yourself. Now you're going to make that jump up. Like that's still rare, right? In this type of world that we're living in.
Yeah, I think it's starting to change like post-COVID, because like I remember like my first introduction as a coach when I was at Wagner of the transfer portal. So we recruited an offensive lineman who played in the Pioneer League. So that's 1AA non-scholarship football. We were one of his first offers in the transfer portal. So coming out of high school, he was basically told your best bet of playing college football was a non-scholarship Division 1AA football league. So we offer him, and then all of a sudden he starts getting like group of 5 or group of 4, whatever it's called now, and he goes to like a group of 4 school, and I'm like, this is a legit thing. Right. Or you get kids that went to the NESCAC, the smart Division 3 schools in New England and upstate New York, and Hamilton, and some of those kids are going to like 1AA, 1A schools. I think now it's starting to be like not as much as it used to be. Like I would still think the best NESCAC kid who wants to enter the portal can go to a 1AA school, but at the end of the day, like, would he want to leave that education of the NESCAC? Not knocking other schools, but like to me, like, why would you want to leave a school that they call the small Ivy League to go to a 1AA school? And I get it, if there's NIL involved and stuff like that, but no, I think sometimes now it's like, I think post-COVID, because COVID kind of helped out some of the Division 2, Division 3 schools of getting kids that were like, maybe not, eligible with the clearinghouse. A lot of people don't even think about that anymore. And just fell through the cracks of, that kid needed his senior film to get the 1A or 1AA offer, but then he goes Division 3, and by the time he has his 5th year, he's playing in the CAA or the NE10 or something. So I think now with like being out of COVID, I don't know how much, because I'm not really in that world anymore, how much a 1AA school is looking down to Division 3, definitely probably Division 2 if they're a dude and stuff like that.
Right.
No, there's no doubt about it. And it's going to continue to change more and more, where you're going to get different things happening from that standpoint. Especially as rosters at the higher level, they get, because you guys don't have roster limits at Division 3, right? So, but you set your own roster limits.
Well, depending on conference, like it's conference based. Like I know the NJAC has a cap.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. So, but Division 1 and FCS has to be at 105, right? So a lot of kids are gonna push down, my guess, and then so you're gonna have less walk-ons available at the higher level, which could present more guys that end up pushing down, and then they try Division 2 or they try FCS, and then they could end up pushing down some great players that could end up pushing down to Division 3 level. So I think it's wild from that standpoint as a whole.
Yeah, it's starting to get crazy. I think it's becoming fun, but I also think it's becoming crazy. Like, I think football recruiting has always been the wild, wild west, depending what era you coach in or playing. But now it's just like Bill Belichick needs to save NIL, which hopefully happens.
Right.
Like,
how is he going to save NIL?
I don't know. I don't have all those answers, but I think what he's doing is cool. Like, I mean, they're starting the whole GM thing. You know, he has Michael Lombardi.
Right.
I think Cal Berkeley got Ron Rivera. Hopefully they just start telling these kids to like sign contracts. So if you want to enter the transfer portal, well, dude, you have a 2-year contract.
Right,
so,
right.
You can't just like up and leave the second it's there, or you can't go to one school, take the NIL money for spring ball, and then leave and go be, fall camp with another school, but you still got your NIL. Like, there has to be some type of, 2-year deal, or it's structured, right? Like, the incoming freshman quarterback is not going to be making more than the starting quarterback just based on, how. So they'll figure out something. However it is, I think it's, there's still going to be old problems that are still going to be there. But for the most part, I think at this point, D3 is still, D3. And I think you're still going to have that little, almost like a protective bubble over it, just because, it's always been that way, and guys are gonna, and if they really just don't want, like, if you're willing to not play because you're not going to make money, then that's okay. That's okay too. I don't want that guy on my team. You know what I mean? Like, that's not what this is about. It's Division III level has always been a lot about like, hey, you're doing this because you really love this, right?
Yep.
And you want to continue your career and play another 4 years of football, not just, go into the workforce or just not stop playing at all. So I think that will kind of stay the same. It's the upper levels that, where it's basically becoming a business now in that retrospect. And they'll figure that out because, almost every team at that level now has a GM, is handling all those kind of things, which, and that's happened last 2 years, like, maybe even less. Right. So if you're not up in the recruiting stuff like you are, which I think is a really great thing and title for you to have, especially at a place like Norwich, where like there are some intricacies with the military and that stuff that you have to figure out, to have that groundwork and that foundation for you in terms of you personally with your career moving to the next level. Like, that's going to be like let's highlight that on this guy's resume. He's done this at this place. Wow, what can he do for us? Plus, think about it. Like, even at you're recruiting nationally, so that's something that a lot of guys at your level don't really do, right? Like, I don't see Castleton going out there and recruiting guys from California. No offense, like that's just what it is, But that's a huge, huge benefit for you. And we talk to a lot of coaches, right? Like, wear a lot of hats, right? Like, and that's, I think, as you're continue to grow, like now you're now running your own room. That's huge, in terms of your career. So good for you, man. It's really cool.
Thank you.
Well, it's been great having you on, Coach. Really, really great having you on. Enjoyed the conversation. Best of luck to you. It's great seeing how quickly you're rising. You're doing some great things, man. So, keep doing that, and I know that you recruit the Jersey area as well. I'm sure that's how you connected with Derek, and we'll continue to stay in touch.
Perfect. Appreciate you guys. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, Coach.
Thanks, Coach. Bye. Great stuff there.
It's an interesting spot.
Yeah. When you look at it, it's amazing how pretty New England is. When it's nice.
It's so gorgeous. We talk about it all the time, dude.
When you look at the campus, it's like it's really, really like nice campus,
Well, it's like that old school college, like you know what I mean, like that New England. Yeah.
That's why New England has so many colleges, I guess. Because it's got that vibe going to it, which is really, really cool. And
absolutely.
It's a tough place because
it's a tough sell because a lot of people think of it immediately like, oh, that means I got to be in the military like right away, right? So you kind of have to go through that and look at some of the other.
The cold weather doesn't appeal to some kids like it used to. So
I just think going away to school doesn't appeal to a lot of kids anymore, bro. Like,
Do you think so? Oh well, I think I don't know.
I really do.
Down south though, they like to go down south because of let me rephrase. Not for football per se. Okay, I'm talking about
okay. That's different. That I think is different.
I think what Coach brought up is a good point. Like, you know, and a lot of these guys brought the same thing up. Like, do they love it? But even when they do love it, this is, I think, the actually more difficult part in recruiting. And obviously at Division III, it's harder from this standpoint because you really have to assess this. And you're going to make a lot of mistakes because it's just invariable. That's just going to happen. But it's hard because even kids that like probably do love it, when you step on campus and you realize Division III football, you're doing the same level of work that Division I players are doing.
Right.
You're just not getting quite as much glory. That's where you get. So they love. Listen, and you probably went through this a little bit too yourself. I mean, I definitely did. Like, when you're practicing, it's a full-time job. You do say to yourself, you're like,
"What am I doing?
Like,
why am I doing this?"
Yeah, like I see all these people, like my
having fun.
My neighbors are taking naps in the middle of the afternoon, and I'm out there beating my head against people the whole time, right? Like,
So you go through that all the time. I really, and I don't care. Look, and that could be at you know what I mean? Like you just think that at any level, you're like, wait.
I think scholarship guys go through that. I think scholarship guys go through it.
100%.
I mean, it's listen now. If you're getting paid, I don't think you go through it as much because you just feel like I'm getting paid. Like fuck,
right.
I don't give
absolutely
fuck what they do with me. I'm getting paid. I'll do whatever they need me to do. So
absolutely.
But as you do start to get to the lower levels, it is harder, and that's why I do think players that I think probably love the game, like just are say to themselves, I'll just go be a frat boy and
absolutely.
College,
well, we used to say it all the time, like even the little things like that guy has a part-time job, like he's gonna make because you couldn't obviously like you weren't getting paid, so like he has the ability to go make money where I have to go to practice, right? So like those little things, it's kind of just like, wait, what? Like, what do you mean? And then definitely when you're talking to people that don't understand it at all, like, wait, why are you doing that? Like, for what? Because you get to play a game for another 4 years. Like, that's a hard sell,
I think it is a hard sell. I think Division IIIs are doing a much better job with this. Like you've got to figure out, and I think they're doing a much better job. What can we do perks wise for these athletes
to separate us?
Right. Like first of all, makes it better for them than the average student. Like the old, we're just going to be like every other student. Then when they come in here, like, yeah, but you need to entice them if they're so. And I'm saying this because they're paying customers too, right? So they're football players. They're not just students in your community, but they're also, and they're paying to be students in your community, and they're playing a sport where they're going to work really, really hard. So try to make sure if they could get like some extra perks, meaning better dorms, right? Better.
Or I know for us, like preferential scheduling, like we always went first. Pick our classes at the times that we wanted with certain professors, right? Like little things like that guys don't really look at because did you have to have from 1 o'clock to 6 o'clock open for practice like year round because of spring ball and that? So both semesters, like I need to be able to pick my classes. You know what I mean? Like that was always a big, like that was a perk, right? Or, just little things like, hey, like you said, like we get to live in these dorms or, just something. Right. And I think the guys
think you can do. I mean, they're like I actually think like, I don't know how much books they like. I hate now I'm sounding like an old person, but like,
I don't even know if they pay for books.
Yeah. I don't even know if they pay for books anymore. I don't know. Even you don't know. Right. Because your era, you still had books, but
I still had I was right where some professors were like, you don't need the book. And then
Right.
some professors were like, get the book. And you're like, well, that's $120. Like, you know what I mean? Like, for one, it's like, and then, you know, oh, we never used it. Like, okay. Well, you know what I mean? Like, so I think some of that stuff, yeah, 100% right. You need to find like what little like even something like look, like what Montclair did this year, where in the spring they traveled up to Canada to play a game. Like,
exactly. Those
some
are
of
all
those
perks. Those are all
absolutely
little like things that I think make the differences, because especially now Montclair is a state school, so they obviously always have football, but whether they have football or not is not probably going to be a huge impact to the population of the school. But at Division III schools, private schools, that's a big part of the revenue for the school, right?
huge,
So,
huge.
you know, whether Keene or Montclair State or have football or not, yes, it does. You know, it's 100 guys that are going to your school, but the schools are so big, right? So it wouldn't. But at like Norwich or some of the other schools that we've talked to, smaller Division IIIs, like private schools, those people, right, the athletes are a large part of the population of the school.
Absolutely, they make up the majority of your numbers, right? Like that's kind of where it's at.
Right, and that's that's what makes those schools a pretty cool culture in a sense, because there is a lot of like, you know, sometimes 40% of the students on campus are athletes, you know, which is like pretty cool. But you know, as a student, that's a cool thing. Like as an athlete, that's a cool thing, because there are other people that are athletes, girls and guys, and you know, you're going through similar things. So that part's pretty cool, but yeah, no, it was a really good conversation. Norwich is one of the places.
Like you like when the majority of your classroom is athletes, right? Like when you're looking
know.
around and okay, there's the girls' basketball team. Yep. Like, oh, okay, we see them going in. Like that's, I think, and that's also where I feel like, you know, that's why you got to get on campus and feel that, right? Like, and like some guys can't go into a school where you're going to have 300 kids in a class. Like that's, you know what I'm saying? Like at some of these bigger schools, that's a big adjustment for them, maybe coming from a smaller high school or a private school, right? To now be just one of the masses. And also now you're in there with non-athletes that, again, they don't understand why, you know, you missed the last two classes. Oh, well, I had a game, you know what I mean? Or whatever it is. Right. Like, that stuff's different.
No doubt. Great episode. Interesting. And by the way, more and more coaches didn't even play in college. It's amazing to me. So,
but at least like you look, he obviously tracked football in the entire time, right? Played high school. Oh my God, I know.
He played high school, right?
What we're talking, right? But like, I just think that whole like, hey, I could go play at a Division III, but I'm going to take this coaching track and I'm going to go into college and say, hey, I'm going to be a student GA right from the jump. Like these guys, their careers are progressing so much faster. Because like they're looking at it now as a career, right? Like
it's just like if you go in now, like you want to be in accounting, let's say. You're interning right from the time, you know, you're a sophomore or something with a firm, right? And you start like learning the ropes. Right. And that's where coaching when you were coming out, it was just beginning to become like it was always, obviously there were always guys that coached, but was really starting to become a thing that you could have a career, really have a career, not just the elite guys, right?
Right.
And when I was in college, I would say if you weren't in FCS, you were low paid, but you were probably full time. Obviously, FBS, those guys were paid better, but none of them were paid crazy, other than the head coach. And then when you got below FCS, guys were making nothing. So
literally,
really attract. Now, even at Division III, like we've talked to some of these guys that have. You know, Montclair only has a few guys, but like some of the private,
look at like Rochester had a big stat. Like, holy hell! dude, like
full-time guys, like in Division III. So, so I think that's an interesting, I think it's a smart investment for colleges, because especially private schools, because what happens is how are you going to get kids to pay $75,000 to go to college? Well, if you're going to play football and pay some version of that, I want to know that I'm going to be getting coached by guys that are there all the time, right? So I have a great experience. So you go to like some of these schools and they have more more full-time coaches, and now you have a Division I level feel in your coaching staff because there's more full-time guys. Right. And so
it
now
feels like a higher level.
Yeah, you're more like, you know what? I'll go do that. So I think that's a smart investment from private. I don't know, state school wise around the country, because that's a different like funding thing. You know what I mean? Right. But so it's different in how they have to handle it. But definitely from a private school standpoint, like if you want kids to go to your private school, like you've got to invest, because the perk of going to Montclair is I'm paying $40,000 less, right, for a good education. Yeah. So if you're a private school, you've got to counter that by saying, hey, I got 7 coaches on staff. Yes, you're paying more, but you're getting a little more hand-holding. Which do you prefer, to pay less, a little bit less, or do you prefer the hand-holding? And then guys can choose which is more their kind of deal. So,
yep.
But I think it's an interesting. It really is.
I mean, look, even thinking about like going back to it, like I want to know that if like during the day I can like if I need to talk to my coach, I can go to his office and he's there. You know what I mean? Like I couldn't talk to my coaches till 3:00 because they were teaching high school. You know? Right. Like that's a different type of thing.
Right. Like those guys are.
Like we weren't having meetings that we weren't having like, hey, it wasn't, hey, pop in the office, we'll watch some tape and we'll go over like what you need to work. Like, no, if that was whatever, I almost felt in a certain type of way like I was taking away from their own family time if I was like, hey, can we stay after practice to go over whatever and sit down in a film room? Like, shit, dude, like they hadn't been home from 5 a.m. right? Like it's a different Division III is a totally different world, bro.
Total, yeah, different world. But I think that it's interesting, like because it's like such a wide range of what they have to do relative to one place to the next. But anyway, right. We've been on for quite a while. When are we back next? Or
Thursday we have Thursday we are back. Where is it? Just spoke to him. Brendan Thompson, who's like he's like a little bit of a mix of motivational stuff with some other like like that type of outlook on like how to create a like your own sense of like your own sense of personality within like the guidelines of how you want to move your career forward and whatnot. And then he's also a lot of like a little bit of mobility and that type of stuff too. So he's got a really big like following in terms of btacceleration.com is his thing. He's out of Missouri. So be interesting to talk to him. He posts a lot of good stuff.
All right, perfect. All right, well, till then, we'll see you guys later.